The darkness of space seemed denser in that region. The Icarus, a medium-sized research vessel, had been floating motionless for 11 hours. The 3 crew members watched screens where contradictory data flickered in red. Captain Ira adjusted the controls for the 3rd time. Nothing changed. The navigation system still insisted they were in Sector Delta 9, but the star chart showed only an irregular void, as if the universe had been hastily ripped and patched. Kai, the engineer, scratched his neck. They had already noticed the strange readings since the beginning of the shift. Unknown particles adhering to the hull, gravitational variations that defied the laws of physics. Taryn, the biologist, broke the silence. She began to speak about patterns and natural cycles, but her voice faded when the proximity sensor emitted an alert. A metallic structure emerged from the darkness, floating like something forgotten. It was the Artemis, a cargo ship missing for 2 years. Ira ordered a cautious approach. Upon docking, they found the door sealed from the inside. Kai used a blowtorch, and the smell of burnt ozone filled the corridor. Inside, everything was intact, consoles on, coffee makers still warm. But there were no bodies. Only a digital diary recorded with a trembling voice. Day 47. The experiments were affecting the crew. They were seeing things. I was seeing things too. Lights that didn't exist. Shadows that breathed. Ira turned off the recording. No one commented on the Artemis being light years off its predicted route. The Artemis's engine room was colder than the rest of the ship. Taryn noticed marks on the floor, as if something heavy had been dragged. Kai found a hidden panel behind a ventilation duct. Engraved on the metal were symbols, geometric shapes that seemed to pulse under the artificial light. Ira recognized part of the sequence. It was a variation of a code used in abandoned research stations decades ago. Upon translating it, they discovered coordinates. They weren't stellar, but temporal. Kai suggested ignoring them, but Taryn insisted on proceeding. While they argued, the Icarus's communication system began to crackle. A distorted voice repeated numbers in a dead language. Jara, the team's medic, entered the room. She was pale, her eyes fixed on something invisible. She said she had been hearing whispers since they entered the Artemis. Ira ordered an immediate retreat, but the path back was blocked. A black mist filled the corridors, absorbing the light. Kai tried to reactivate the generators, but the controls were unresponsive. Taryn found a sealed compartment in the ceiling. Inside was a vial of silvery liquid and a warning. Sample X9. Do not expose to organic matter. The mist approached, and Jara began to laugh. But it wasn't her laughter. The vial fell to the floor, and the silvery liquid spread. The mist recoiled, as if fearing contact. Kai pulled Jara away, while Taryn collected the remaining substance in a hermetically sealed container. Ira decided to take the vial back to the Icarus, even against protocols. Upon returning, they noticed the ship's clock was 7 hours ahead. The Artemis's systems shut down completely, and the structure began to disintegrate into shimmering particles. On the Icarus, Jara regained consciousness, but had no memory of recent events. She only repeated one phrase: "They are not dead. They are waiting." Analyzing the sample, Taryn discovered it was alive, a form of dark energy-based life. While they debated what to do, the ship's engine failed. The navigation panel showed a new destination, the coordinates of the spatial Bermuda Triangle. Kai suggested destroying the vial, but Ira hesitated. The substance seemed to react to emotions, amplifying them. Jara, now calm, said the answer was in the Artemis's log. They reviewed it and found a hidden entry. Day 53. The sample is not an organism. It is a key. The ship trembled. On the monitor, a blue light appeared on the horizon, pulling them towards it. No one spoke of resistance. After all, they had been in the triangle for much longer than they imagined. The blue light enveloped the Icarus, like a dense liquid. The instruments failed, and the only source of light was the glow of the vial brought from the Artemis. Taryn watched it hypnotized. The silvery substance formed patterns within the container, as if trying to communicate something. Jara was preparing dehydrated soup in the galley, but stopped when she heard voices coming from the ventilation system. Ira ordered everyone to gather in the command cabin, but Kai did not appear. They found him in the engine room, standing before an open panel, muttering about repairing time. His eyes were glazed over, and his hands were bleeding from pulling wires. The ship shook again, and an image appeared on the monitors, an abandoned space station floating in a vortex of stars. It was the cosmic structure, a project cancelled 50 years ago. Ira recognized the angular shape of the towers, identical to the symbols on the Artemis. Terran injected a sedative into Kai, while Jara cleaned his wounds. He awoke hours later, with no memory of what had happened, but with a spiral-shaped scar on his wrist. The Icarus was now only a few hundred kilometers from the structure. They approached slowly, recording details: dried hydroponic gardens, intact laboratories, an isolation chamber with doors sealed from the inside. Upon entering, they realized the air was still breathable. Ira activated the emergency lights, revealing walls covered in equations scribbled in ancient languages. In the center of the main hall was a pedestal with a hole shaped like Terran's vial. She hesitated, but placed the container inside. The silvery substance flowed into the pedestal, and a projection appeared, a rotating sphere marked with coordinates that corresponded to those of the spatial Bermuda Triangle. Kai noticed something was wrong. The coordinates didn't point to a place, but to a moment. The projection showed the Icarus itself, but at different points in time. In one, they saw themselves dead, floating in the void. Jara vomited upon recognizing Terran's body with translucent skin and glowing veins. The projection changed. Now it was the intact Artemis, with the crew alive. They laughed, ate, slept, until the camera focused on the engine room door. Someone or something was outside, pressing its face against the window. The image faded. The pedestal emitted a low hum, and the Icarus was pulled into the structure. The containment systems failed, and the empty vial began to suck the air from the ship. Terran held it, but the silvery substance had already vanished. Ira ordered an evacuation, but it was too late. The isolation chamber door opened, revealing a human figure, but without a face, wearing an Artemis uniform. It extended a hand, and the entire Icarus shut down. In the silence, Jara whispered, "They want us to choose." The faceless figure remained motionless, its hand suspended in the air. Ira felt a pressure in her chest, as if the vacuum of space itself were crushing her. Terran clutched the empty vial, now cold, while Kai tried to manually restart the systems. Jara, however, stepped forward. Her voice sounded clear, without tremor. "Choose what?" The figure did not respond. Instead, the air around them began to distort, projecting overlapping images. The Icarus in flames, the intact Artemis, and Jara herself holding a baby that evaporated in her hands. Kai shouted something about illusions, but Ira interrupted him. "They are not illusions. They are possibilities." The silvery substance had vanished, but its effect persisted. The structure, the ship, even time seemed malleable. Terran noticed it first. The equations on the walls weren't calculations, but questions. How much would you pay to see tomorrow? What would you abandon to survive? The faceless figure was a reflection of themselves, a sum of all the choices not made. Jara fell to her knees, holding her head. They are everywhere. In lost ships, in abandoned stations. We are them. Ira understood. The triangle wasn't a place, but a test. The substance, the key, the structure, everything was a mechanism to filter who deserved access to what lay beyond. "It's not about surviving," she said. "It's about accepting that we control nothing." Kai, still struggling with the controls, roared, "Then let's die here." The figure finally moved its hand. The projection of the rotating sphere reappeared, but this time it showed Earth surrounded by a web of bright lines. They were the routes of all lost ships, connected like a nervous system. Terran whispered, "It's a network. They are cataloging." Jara stood up, her eyes shining with an inner light. "We are not explorers. We are specimens." Ira ordered everyone back to the Icarus, but the ship was no longer there. In its place floated a translucent cocoon, pulsing in sync with their hearts. The figure extended its hand again, and the darkness dissolved. They awoke in the Icarus's cabin, with all systems functioning normally. The clock showed the same time as when they entered the Artemis. There was no sign of the structure, the mist, or the vial. Kai examined the logs, everything erased. Taryn found a single strand of silvery hair in her sleeve. Jara looked at the void and smiled. Days later, upon returning to Earth, no one believed their story. But in the following nights, Ira saw shadows moving in her peripheral vision. Kai began to design impossible machines, based on dreams he couldn't remember. Taryn published an article on dark energy-based life, receiving only criticism. And Jara, now pregnant, caressed her belly and whispered, "They are waiting." Somewhere, in the silence between the stars, the bright web continued to expand.